The Sahel region in Africa appears like a literal graveyard with skeletal remains and circling vultures. Hidden here is an ultra-modern military base firmly built right beneath a steep, treacherous cliff. Heavily armed mercenaries are still diligently conducting strict patrols in front of the entrance. Suddenly, a dark shadow with glowing red eyes appears out of thin air and places a cold, sharp knife right against the guard's neck. With brutal and lightning-fast sword strikes, the raider has turned the lobby area into a bloody battlefield. After clearing out the enemies, the young soldier wonders to his boss why they only saw 2 guards along the entire way. The captain, with a stern look, reminds his comrade to stay highly alert because the target item is right ahead. The 2 quickly move in front of a massive automatic door where a glowing sign indicates the entrance. Just as they step deep into the storage compartment, the boss signals that the important target item is lying right over there. Before them now is a metal cargo crate thoroughly sealed with mysterious Bagua symbols. Both eagerly open the mysterious crate, but their smiles instantly fade upon seeing the horrific thing inside. The captain realizes in shock that the entire Special Forces team has fallen into a prearranged deadly trap. At that very moment, the countdown timer on the explosive charge has a mere 20 seconds left. Without a second thought, he shouts loudly, ordering Red Wolf to run immediately, while the subordinate wants him to escape first. The young soldier decides to stay behind to block the door, urging his commander to leave the death vault right away. With a resolute gaze mixed with self-sacrifice, Red Wolf roars that if he doesn't leave, both of them will surely perish together. The captain agonizingly screams his comrade's name in despair, but there is nothing he can do to turn the tide. With all his remaining strength, the young soldier puts everything into his final plea, demanding the boss to survive. Time relentlessly ticks down to a flat 0 as the detonator is officially triggered in a split second. A massive pillar of fire erupts violently, swallowing everything around in an earth-shattering explosion. Shocking news on the dark web announces that the leader of the Wolf organization has perished in a horrific explosion in Africa. Yet in reality, the legendary area assassin king survived and escaped from the ruins, though his heart aches over Red Wolf's sacrifice. During his recovery, he miraculously reconstructed his meridians and successfully broke through to the transformation realm, a supreme martial arts stage. Determined to cast off his bloody past, he chooses to go into hiding, living like an old turtle under a fake name to fulfill a final wish. Stepping out from the crowded station exit, the man with deep, contemplative eyes begins his journey into the bustling city. Standing beneath the cool green canopy, he smirks confidently as he prepares to enter a new game with a completely different identity. Approaching a taxi, he gives the driver the address at number 33 Tianwu Garden and requests him to leave immediately. On the way, the driver curiously asks if he is a traveler from afar coming to willing to visit relatives. The old man also kindly warns him that trying to join the Feng family is no easy feat, to which he only replies with indifference. The car stops in front of a majestic and splendid mansion, marking the beginning of the legendary Assassin King's turbulent journey as a live-in son-in-law. The taxi driver smiles and says he will wait here to settle the return fare, but that makes the assassin feel a bit strange. He quietly steps out of the car, flings his backpack over his shoulder, and heads straight toward the luxurious mansion's gate decisively. Witnessing the bustling scene, the driver assumes the Feng family is having a joyful celebration today and secretly mocks his poor appearance as trying to climb the social ladder. Standing before the majestic Feng Manor sign, he tells himself he will soon fulfill his father's final wish before starting to investigate the truth of the past. Just as he is about to enter, he is rudely stopped by 2 security guards in black suits who demand to see his invitation to the party. His eyes flash with a hint of coldness mixed with impatience as he repeats the question about the invitation, which he currently doesn't have in hand. Facing the guard's aggressive attitude, he calmly states that he is here to see Feng Wanning, whom he calls Uncle Feng. To prove it, he takes out an old photo and asserts that the man in the solemn military uniform is his late father. The guard scratches his head in astonishment upon noticing the striking resemblance between him and the heroic soldier in the photo. Holding the small wooden box tightly, he believes that once Uncle Feng sees his father's medal, his identity will be verified. The guards instantly change their attitude, respectfully asking him to wait a moment so they can report his presence to the head of the house immediately. Inside, the old master of the Feng family is deeply moved by the rapid growth of his granddaughter Yun on her big day. The beautiful young lady smiles and reassures him that even after getting married, she will always remain a loyal member of the family. Master Feng proudly announces to all the guests the grand engagement between his daughter and the young master of the Wan family. The talented and beautiful couple raise their glasses together to toast the alliance between the two powers, promising a brilliant business future. The guests raise their glasses in unison, cheering out congratulations, making the party atmosphere lively and filled with the aura of prestige. Suddenly, a subordinate rushes in breathlessly to report an urgent matter, causing the smile on the family head's face to vanish instantly. He tremblingly presents the wooden box containing the glittering metal and reports that a mysterious young man is waiting outside the gate. The moment he sees the familiar item, Mr. Feng is so shocked that cold sweat breaks out, realizing that someone from the Jiang family has arrived. His sudden change of expression leaves the women of the family astonished and fearful of this ominous sign. Mrs. Feng shockingly reveals to her daughter the childhood engagement that her father had arranged for her older sister with the Jiang family's son, Jiang Hao. Right at the banquet table, the younger sister earnestly begs her grandfather to stand up for her sister, while the elder orders Wanming to go and see who the newcomer is. Wanming accepts the responsibility and blames himself, thinking that if his brother-in-arms hadn't sacrificed himself to save him back then, he wouldn't have been disabled for life. Stepping into the main hall, the head of the Feng family is stunned to recognize that the young man standing before him is the close nephew from years ago. Unable to hide his choked-up joy, he confesses that he has spent so much effort searching for his whereabouts all these years. Jiang Hao offers a bright smile to greet Uncle Feng, while expressing his apologies for causing the elder so much worry. Mr. Feng approaches and tightly embraces the young man, patting his shoulder while highly praising him for growing into a true, honorable gentleman. In the joyful reunion, the family head enthusiastically asks about his old friend's health and wonders why he didn't come to the party together. Suddenly, Jiang Hao's eyes grow sorrowful as he recalls how 10 years ago, old wounds relapsed and took his father away from this world forever. The terrible news causes Mr. Feng to freeze, his eyes bloodshot with immense shock at the passing of his soulmate. Wanming still endlessly blames himself for the injuries that Hao's late father had endured on his behalf. But Jiang Hao smiles faintly and comforts Uncle Feng, saying that all the pain has now faded deep into the past. He bluntly shares that the purpose of his trip is to fulfill his father's final wish and clear up all uncertainties. The family head sighs softly as he understands that heavy responsibility, but the harsh reality of the present fills him with worry. Suddenly, the Feng family's matriarch and her 2 daughters appear, stepping down the stairs with an extremely elegant and noble bearing. Their glamorous and delicate beauty instantly draws everyone's gaze, creating an invisible pressure in the living room. Mr. Feng warmly introduces him to his wife and Ian, not forgetting to remind them of their childhood friendship. Beholding her radiant beauty, Jiang Hao secretly marvels at how time has turned the little girl of the past into a peerless beauty. The young lady offers a subtle, knowing smile, but behind those eyes seems to hide indescribable personal troubles. On the contrary, the younger sister clearly shows her resentment, demanding to know his true purpose for suddenly returning after a 10-year disappearance. An arrogant young man points his finger at Jiang Hao's face and sneers that he is only trying to cling to the wealthy Feng family to change his life. Mr. Feng immediately barks, ordering him to shut his mouth instantly before things go too far. Standing in the middle of the tension, the young lady Yun asks her father in shock what on earth is going on. With deep, solemn eyes, the family head softly calls out Haozi's name as a prelude to the secret he has harbored for so long. He slowly explains that the marriage contract between him and Yun was the final wish entrusted by his father years ago. Both Jiang Hao and the young lady are frozen in shock by the sudden news of this unexpected childhood arrangement. Mr. Feng looks straight into the young man's eyes and firmly asserts that he will absolutely keep his promise to his old friend. Jiang Hao lowers his head in contemplation, realizing that his late father's wish is the very bond of this destiny. However, he secretly thinks that someone like him, who is deeply entangled in the bloody underworld, will only bring suffering to others. With a resolute gaze, he firmly proposes to Uncle Feng to cancel this engagement, so they can both set each other free. The arrogant young master points his finger and shouts, accusing him of being an opportunist trying to cling to a wealthy family to change his life. He insults him as a mere beggar who is unfit to be a son-in-law, enraging Uncle Feng, who threatens to teach his own son a lesson. Furious, Uncle Feng raises his hand to slap him in punishment, but the guy only frantically challenges his father to beat him to death. With tears welling up in her eyes, the young lady Yun chokingly asks her father why he is so heartless as to cancel her current engagement for a stranger. Despite the fierce opposition, the family head loudly declares that the marriage contract from 20 years ago is an absolute final wish that cannot be altered. Overwhelmed with resentment that her happiness is being bartered for an old promise, she cries out and loudly reproaches her father for being unworthy. Yun runs out of the room sobbing to everyone's dismay, leaving behind a gloomy and tense atmosphere. Uncle Feng pats his shoulder to reassure him, telling him to freshen up and rest, while promising that he will soon find a proper solution. The silent night gradually descends, blanketing the majestic mansion under a sparkling starry sky that seems to conceal undercurrents. Sitting in meditation in the dark, Jiang Hao circulates his true qi to purify his body and prepare for his breakthrough into the supreme transformation realm. The old master of the Feng family contemplates silently, and asks his son if he is truly determined to marry Yun to Jiang Hao. In the quiet space of the room, Wan Ming bows his head and admits that the death of Haozi's father years ago was entirely his own fault. He emotionally recalls that if his brother hadn't been heavily wounded while saving him, the Feng family wouldn't be as powerful as it is today, so he cannot break his word. Even as his father reminds him that keeping the promise will cost Ian's happiness, Wan Ming remains steadfastly convinced that his daughter will eventually understand. Grandfather Feng warns in a low voice about the wrath of the Wan family, especially since the entire Wuling city is watching this current wealthy marriage alliance. Under the heavy pressure, the current head of the house remains resolute that he will find a way to face and properly handle this whole mess. Looking out at the moon through the window, the old master finally nods in agreement but sets 3 extremely strict trial conditions. The 3 demands regarding a trial period, financial independence, and a live-in son-in-law status make Wan Ming worry about whether Haozi will accept this arrangement. The old master slowly walks toward the fireplace, asserting that the Feng family's status does not allow marrying their daughter to a nobody with no background. Wan Ming concludes the conversation with a thoughtful gaze, determined to persuade Haozi to accept becoming a wealthy family's live-in son-in-law. Jiang Hao sits in meditation circulating his qi, with golden energy blazing around him as he tries to break through to the transformation realm. In his mind he secretly tells himself that Uncle Feng has worked too hard for him, so he absolutely must not cause him any more worry. Suddenly a knock sounds at the door, and Uncle Feng stands outside, asking if his poor nephew has fallen asleep yet. He hastily puts on a white shirt to cover the dragon tattoo on his chest, and warmly invites his uncle into the room. When Uncle Feng brings up the marriage contract with the young lady Yin, Jiang Hao calmly replies that he will comply with all his requests. The family head is still a bit skeptical, so he asks again if he truly agrees to marry into the Feng family as a live-in son-in-law, and he nods decisively. The old uncle cannot contain his emotion, placing a hand on his shoulder and offering a belated apology for this disadvantageous coercion. He smiles, advising his uncle not to torment himself, while urging him to get some rest to start arranging new plans. Watching the elder's figure recede, he tells himself he will only agree to stay here for 3 months, and then quietly leave this wealthy household. Meanwhile, beneath the full moon and the brilliant Milky Way, the Wan family mansion looms like a fortress full of dangerous conspiracies. Wan Guofeng roared in astonishment upon hearing that the other party wanted to unilaterally cancel the grand marriage contract. He slammed the table and shouted that the engagement ceremony was only 3 days away, deeming this an outrageous joke. Despite Wan Ming explaining his personal difficulties, the Wan guy still furiously accused the Feng family of making a fool out of him. To express sincere remorse, the head of the Feng family decided to completely withdraw from the lucrative project in Anxin district. But Guofeng's anger did not subside. He waved his hand and threatened to make the Feng family pay an incredibly heavy price. With an aggressive attitude, he ordered the guest to be kicked out immediately while Wan Ming quietly left with a face full of sorrow. In the midst of the quiet night, a neon-lit cyber cafe appeared as the secret stopover for the hidden assassin. In the noisy and bustling space, Jiang Hao still sat calmly in front of the computer with a blazing red butterfly symbol on the screen. His hands typed swiftly to access the dark web in order to search for the latest fluctuations in the underworld. He froze upon coming across the profile of an S-class martial arts grandmaster with a massive bounty, secretly questioning who was behind this kill order. Jiang Hao discovered that Grandmaster Zhui Yumai had personally punished the evildoer from the Cour's family to seek justice for an innocent schoolgirl. He continued searching but suddenly stopped short at a shocking piece of information on the screen that left him absolutely astounded. The dark web announced that Heavenly Wolf had officially taken over the position of leader of the Wolf organization right after the Wolf King was presumed dead. Traumatic memories of the final mission suddenly rushed back, recreating the scene where he and his brother Red Wolf risked their lives to escape. He still vividly remembered the silhouette of Red Wolf bravely using all his remaining strength to block the door and protect his captain. Then a massive pillar of fire erupted, flattening everything and claiming the life of his most loyal comrade in a split second. His eyes became bloodshot with resentment upon realizing the anomaly, because Lone Wolf was supposed to be the rightful successor. He quietly stood up and left the computer, his mind endlessly repeating the name Heavenly Wolf with suspicions of a bloody usurpation. Hiding the pain behind a stony face, he swore to unmask the traitors and make them pay for Red Wolf's sacrifice. In the middle of the silent night city under the full moon, the Assassin King began to embark on a perilous journey of revenge. Jiang Hao left the cyber cafe, secretly calculating in his mind to stay here for a few more days to track down clues and gradually get used to the new territory. Suddenly, a white van rushed over and braked sharply right next to him, creating a roadblock situation reeking of gunpowder. A group of tough mercenaries stepped out of the vehicle, the leader jutting his chin and demanding him to cooperate and come with them immediately. They simultaneously drew sharp knives and surrounded him in a threatening manner, but facing those blades, the Assassin King maintained an extremely calm expression. The guy with the keloid scar pressed the knife close to his body and threatened to make him bleed if he dared to resist, leading him to secretly assess that these guys were just street thugs. To avoid exposing his identity too early, Jiang Hao pretended to be terrified, raised his hands in surrender, and quietly stepped into the van under their direction. As soon as he settled into the back seat, he discovered a young girl pitifully bound hand and foot, with black duct tape over her mouth. He continued his act by tremblingly offering to hand over the 300 yuan in his pocket to be spared, but they gruffly declared that their goal was not petty cash. A subtle smile flashed across the Assassin King's lips as he secretly wondered about the true purpose of this unexpected trip. The mercenary sitting in the front snapped at him to stop asking questions and promised to pay a large sum of remuneration after completing the upcoming job. The white van glided through the silent night under the full moon, carrying the Assassin King and unresolved conspiracies. The destination was a magnificent and luxurious mansion, completely engulfed in a gloomy atmosphere full of anxiety. Inside the living room, the most powerful figures of the family were fully gathered with incredibly tense expressions. The authoritative old master narrowed his eyes at Feng and pressed him to answer if there were any clues about the audacious culprit who dared to kidnap Yao Yao. The man reported in despair that despite utilizing all connections from the underworld to the legitimate business world, there was still absolutely no news. The old master ordered in a deep voice to have the ransom money ready while simultaneously devoting all efforts to tracking down the criminal's whereabouts. However, a plump family member complained that the current funds were depleted and they could not gather the 500 million yuan. He even made the ridiculous suggestion to negotiate with the kidnappers to lower the ransom amount to 100 million. Outraged, Feng shouted at his eldest brother, asking if the kidnapped person was his own son Ji Feng, would he still be so calm? Responding to that fury was the fat guy's indifferent gaze as he affirmed that even if it were his own flesh and blood, he would still maintain the same stance. The old master slammed his hand hard onto the wooden chair, creating a heavy, oppressive aura that enveloped the entire living room. He roared, demanding both of them to shut up immediately to end the ongoing meaningless argument. With a profound gaze, he asserted that money is just a worldly possession, while a human life is something irreplaceable. Meanwhile, the mysterious van had driven deep into an abandoned factory area standing isolated in the dark night. The kidnappers roughly dragged Jiang Hao and the young girl out of the vehicle under the supervision of rugged henchmen. Facing the victim's extreme terror, the Assassin King maintained a face as cold as ice, waiting for his opportunity. A mercenary roughly ripped the duct tape off the girl's mouth, causing her so much pain that tears welled up. Having just regained her voice, the poor young lady screamed for help in vain amidst the gloomy space of the factory. The guy with the keloid scar approached with a despicable laugh and threatened to torture her before ending the beautiful girl's life. Despite the victim threatening to commit suicide to preserve her honor, The villain nonchalantly threw out cruel insults. The leader with the keloid scar ordered his subordinates to quickly get to work instead of standing there bragging about their superb filming skills. They swiftly set up a professional camera on a tripod, making the young girl tremble as she asked about their true purpose. The poor young lady realized in shock that the villains intended to film an execution scene to force the Jiang family to hand over the ransom money quickly. The bald guy standing behind the lens gave a disgusting smile, and admitted that this little girl indeed had a very sharp mind. Outraged by the horrifying cruelty of these people, she cried and called them inhumane monsters. Jiang Hao calmly reiterated the promise of the remuneration, but the mercenary just laughed loudly and said he would burn plenty of hell money for him. In the middle of the cold abandoned factory, the criminals began setting the scene for a real-life horror movie full of death. The victim desperately pleaded with him to quickly kneel down and beg for mercy before that ruthless blade could strike. The killer praised his courage and promised to pass on his last words if he agreed to hand over all the money he currently had. Jiang Hao's eyes suddenly turned bone-chillingly cold. He wondered to himself why they insisted on seeking death even though he had intended not to stain his hands with blood again. The mercenary laughed heartily, thinking that Jiang Hao was a moron because he was about to die yet still spoke arrogant words. He calmly replied to the challenge and asserted that the money was exactly the fee to buy their last words. His eyes flashed coldly as he declared that this time, they were the ones who would have to pay the price for their arrogance. The boss standing nearby clicked his tongue sarcastically, considering him so stupid that he had lost interest in killing him personally. A rugged butcher with a long scar on his face immediately stepped forward, swinging a shiny blade and demanding to execute him on behalf of the boss. He roared ferociously and charged straight at him like a wild beast, making his accomplices believe that his death was already sealed. With a thunderous slash, the butcher put all his strength into killing his opponent right in front of the paralyzed young girl. The poor young lady widened her eyes in terror. Her breath seemingly stopped before the brutal scene unfolding right before her eyes. However, in the blink of an eye, the dark shadow with the glowing red eyes of the assassin king closed in and delivered a brutal strike to the opponent's vital spot. The butcher collapsed onto the cold factory floor, causing the trembling subordinates to report to the boss that their second brother had stopped breathing. Jiang Hao smirked mysteriously as the mercenary pointed a gun at him and threatened to send him to hell to apologize to his brothers. He used the tip of his foot to kick an iron bar on the floor high up into the air, then unleashed a powerful spinning kick. Instantly, the iron bar was turned into a deadly weapon shooting forward at a wind-tearing speed. With absolute precision, the iron bar sliced through the air straight toward the target in the blink of an eye. The thunderous strike shattered the gun in the criminal's hand, forcing him to scream in pain and shock. Realizing the danger, the rest of the group roared simultaneously, demanding their accomplices to kill him at all costs for revenge. A bullet hissed as it left the barrel, carrying a malicious intent aimed straight at the assassin king's vital spot. With godlike reflexes, he performed a mid-air somersault to dodge the attack in an incredibly artistic manner. As soon as he landed, he closed in and unleashed a brutal finishing move, causing the enemy's blood to splatter all over the cold factory floor. The dark shadow with glowing red eyes quietly stood behind the collapsing corpses, spreading extreme terror among the survivors. The bold leader trembled and backed away in fear, stammering to ask who on earth he was to possess such terrifying murderous intent. Jiang Hao closed in right behind him and coldly replied that his name was not something a piece of trash like him deserved to know. With a brutal strike, he slammed the criminal's head straight into the ground, shattering the bricks and stones in the horror of the onlookers. Looking at the stack of dollars in his hand, he clicked his tongue and blamed himself for collecting the last words fee but accidentally finishing them off before hearing their dying messages. The young lady still tightly bound hand and foot desperately asked for his help, but the only response was the indifferent gaze of a cold assassin. Suddenly, he swung his arm and threw a sharp blade tearing through the air straight toward the girl trembling in terror. The millimeter-perfect blade trajectory severed the rope amidst the extreme astonishment of the beautiful young lady. Despite the victim chokingly thanking him, he silently turned his back to walk away and ordered her absolutely not to reveal his presence. Shortly after, a fleet of police cars and ambulances surrounded the factory to rescue the young girl and clean up the bloody battlefield. Under the quiet moonlight, the girl stared blankly into the darkness as her father and grandfather rushed over breathlessly, calling Yao Yao's name in relief. The young lady Yao Yao sobbed bitterly in her grandfather's warm embrace after just surviving a terrifying nightmare. A police officer approached the scene to begin taking her statement regarding the identity of the mysterious savior who single-handedly took down the kidnappers. Facing the barrage of questions, she deliberately gave a false description, claiming it was a short, fat, middle-aged man to mislead the investigation. The night gradually fell with a crescent moon hanging high above, as if silently observing the unrevealed secrets of the city. Upon returning home, the old master saw through his granddaughter's thoughts and pressed her on whether she had lied to the police to protect that man. The young lady bowed her head and admitted that she had indeed seen her benefactor's face, but she would absolutely never sell out the person who saved her life. The old master sighed, reminding his granddaughter of their family's prestigious status, and warning that the man might have saved her out of a dark ulterior motive. With anxious eyes, he gently patted her and urged her to quickly return to her room to rest and soothe her fears. Yao Yao quietly leaned against her bedroom door in the silent space, her mind constantly replaying the image of that mysterious dark silhouette. The young lady secretly wondered whether that righteous act truly stemmed from the goodness of his heart, or if there was another hidden conspiracy behind it. The old master of the Jiang family thoughtfully ordered his trusted subordinates to do everything in their power to protect his precious granddaughter. He asserted that starting tomorrow, the ultimate mission was to ensure Yao Yao's absolute safety, and absolutely no further mistakes would be allowed. With cold, sharp, authoritative eyes, the old master demanded that they secretly investigate and uncover the true identity of the mysterious person who saved his granddaughter's life. Meanwhile, Jiang Hao was executing his phantom step movement technique, gliding like a speeding ghost amidst the rows of luxurious villas. He quickly approached and slipped through the gates of the Feng manor in the dead of the silent night to return to his room without making a sound. Just as he stepped into the main hall, the Assassin King was surprised to see all the members of the Feng family sitting and waiting with an incredibly tense atmosphere. The arrogant young master immediately stood up, pointed a finger at his face, and loudly reprimanded him for daring to stay out late right after becoming a live-in son-in-law. He maliciously reminded him of the Feng family's strict rule to be home before 10 o'clock at night, and mocked his lack of discipline. Mr. Feng couldn't hold back his anger and shouted loudly, demanding his son to watch his mouth and respectfully call him brother-in-law as is proper. Ignoring his father's warning, the young man continued his sarcastic remarks, considering him merely a lowly firefly trying to compete with the blinding moonlight of the Wan family. The arrogant young man of the Feng family endlessly bragged about the power of Boss Lei, a notorious underworld kingpin, to intimidate Jiang Hao. Wan Ming remained silent as he thought of the cruelty of the underworld, where rumors always carried the omen of a bloody purge. The family atmosphere grew heavy as the members watched their relative's silhouette with their own distinct calculations and anxieties. Wan Ming approached and placed a hand on his prospective brother-in-law's shoulder, sincerely promising to use all his power to protect him from the lurking dangers. With cold, sharp eyes, Jiang Hao asserted that people like Boss Lei were not qualified to make him fearful and promised to make them regret it. The old master of the Feng family snorted coldly, dropping a warning that he should know his own limits, and never repeat the mistake of coming home late like today. Treating the contempt like wind blowing past his ears, he casually announced that he was going back to his room, leaving behind stares filled with indignation. Wan Ming earnestly pleaded with his father not to take the young man's attitude to heart, while the old master merely hoped secretly that this kid wouldn't bring disaster to their family. 3 days passed. The morning sunlight enveloped the bustling city, signaling that a new investigative journey had officially begun. Standing before an old iron gate, Jiang Hao confirmed that this was exactly the place where his brother Red Wolf's family had lived in the past. Jiang Hao stood frozen before the old house, suspicions arising in his mind as he saw the place completely deserted without a single soul. Fortunately, he met an old neighbor lady and received the news that the entire family had moved away a year ago. He hurriedly asked about their new whereabouts, but the old lady didn't know either. She only knew that a young girl frequently came by to check on the place. The old lady continued to reveal that the girl was very tight-lipped and, on average, would return here only once every month or so. Not missing the opportunity, Jiang Hao pulled out a generous stack of cash, handed it to the old lady, and earnestly asked her to call him immediately when she saw that girl appear. Standing in the empty alley, he secretly wondered why Red Wolf's family had to flee and live under the mysterious fake name Sapo. Walking on the bustling street, The Assassin King suspected that all these anomalies were closely related to his comrade's death. On the other side of the city, a skyscraper stood tall beneath the clear blue sky, as if harboring sinister conspiracies. In a luxurious apartment, the young master of the Wan family was still deeply immersed in sleep next to a beautiful woman. Sudden, frantic knocking on the door rang out, causing him to jolt awake and grumpily curse whoever dared to ruin his precious sleep. Wan Jiming was changing clothes when his trusted subordinate Xiangzi suddenly entered the room, turning the atmosphere serious. The young master hurriedly asked whether his henchman had investigated any information about the guy he was particularly concerned about. The subordinate reported that Jiang Hao was merely a college dropout who had just returned after years of wandering abroad. Hearing this, the young master of the Wan family became so furious that he tensed up and mocked his opponent for being nothing more than a lowly insect. He brushed off his subordinate's suggestion to eliminate him and decided to use a softer approach before meeting Ian in person. At a quiet tea house, the young lady of the Feng family clearly showed her sorrow as she was immersed in a mess of thoughts. Upon seeing the familiar figure, she gently set her teacup down and wondered why the Wan guy had asked to meet her so abruptly. Wan Jiming got straight to the point, pressing her on whether she truly wanted to follow her father's orders and marry a poor, strange man. Ian sadly explained that Jiang Hao's father had sacrificed himself to save her father, so this was a debt of gratitude that the family was forced to repay. To her, canceling the engagement now would be no different from smearing the reputation of her father, who had always valued promises more than his own life. Wan Jiming furiously slammed the table, screaming that if the Feng family cancelled their engagement, he would become a laughingstock for the entire Wuling city. Ian suppressed her sorrow and stepped closer, earnestly apologizing on behalf of her parents, even knowing that things were beyond salvage. She coldly declared that the debt of gratitude from the past had now been settled fair and square, then decisively turned her back, leaving the bewildered young master behind. Jiming's eyes suddenly turned sinister. He pulled out his phone and ordered his subordinates to immediately execute their scheming backup plan. Meanwhile, as Jiang Hao was diligently training, he received a call from the old neighbor lady informing him that the mysterious girl had appeared. He hurriedly left the mansion, leaving behind Uncle Feng's inquiries with a dismissive excuse to venture into the night. Just as he reached the main road, he flagged down a yellow taxi and received a warm welcome from the middle-aged driver. As soon as Jiang Hao requested to go to Puyang Road, the driver smiled and urged him to get in quickly so as not to waste any time. Stepping inside, he encountered a rugged thug already sitting in the back seat. While the driver explained that business was tough these days, so he had to take on extra passengers, the taxi glided down the deserted street under the neon lights, carrying the Assassin King into a preset trap. The yellow taxi glided down the quiet suburban road under the sparkling starry night sky. Sitting in the back seat, Jiang Hao deeply observed the surroundings and questioned the true destination they were leading him to. He immediately interrogated the driver upon realizing that this route was completely unfamiliar and did not pass through Mengyang Road as agreed. The guy sitting in the passenger seat advised him to just relax because their boss was very eager to meet his future brother-in-law. Finally, the car stopped in front of a majestic, splendid mansion radiating brilliant light amidst the silent night. Jiang Hao decisively stepped out of the car under the driver's order that he must go in alone to meet the mysterious boss. The bodyguard standing guard at the lobby promised that no one would touch a single hair on his head if he knew how to cooperate and behave properly. With the leisurely demeanor of a king, he walked deep inside to see who was so interested in meeting him. Standing in the middle of the luxurious living room, he coldly demanded the strangers waiting on the sofa to immediately state their names. Wan Jiming, while enjoying a glass of red wine, sarcastically exposed his identity as the live-in fiancé of the Feng family. Jiang Hao stood in the middle of the luxurious living room, calmly questioning the young master why he went through the trouble of orchestrating a kidnapping to bring him all the way here. Wan Jiming contemptuously replied with bitter insults, claiming that a poor loser like him was only dirtying the reputation of the young lady Ian. Facing such arrogance, the Assassin King maintained a cold expression and demanded the other party to state the true purpose of this meeting. He growled an order, telling him to leave a finger behind as proof and then immediately disappear from Ian's life if he still wanted to keep his life. The atmosphere suddenly became extremely tense as the guardian bodyguard Xiangzi began approaching with the intention of using force to suppress him. Jiang Hao gave a faint smile of contempt, casually challenging to see what would happen if he flatly refused that outrageous demand. Jiming laughed wildly and ordered his henchmen to quickly teach this arrogant young man a lesson he would never forget. The butcher growled fiercely, cracking his knuckles to create bone-chilling popping sounds as if wanting to crush his opponent instantly. Suddenly, the room's door was kicked open by a thunderous kick that terrified all the Wan family's guards out of their wits. It was Xiao Xiai, Uncle Feng's bodyguard, who revealed that the boss, out of deep concern for his future brother-in-law's safety, had dispatched him to follow and protect him. The bodyguard Xiangzi roared ferociously, putting all his strength into a heavy punch aimed straight at the target. The collision created a fierce shockwave, making the surrounding space tremble from its thunderous power. The attacker trembled in shock upon realizing the overwhelming recoil force, extreme terror welling up in his heart. With godlike reflexes, Jiang Hao unleashed a powerful spinning kick to the ribs, kicking the guardian flying like a sandbag. Looking at the opponent collapsed at his feet, he secretly mocked that this was the so-called protective capability that Uncle Feng had painstakingly arranged for him. Realizing their henchmen had been defeated, two mysterious dark figures stepped out and ordered everyone to immediately move to the backyard. There, a deep pit had already been dug like a mass grave to bury those who dared to defy the Wan family. Standing before the edge of the pit, the driver clicked his tongue and sneered that he had refused to take the path of life, insisting instead on walking into a deadly trap with no way out. The bald guy shouted, forcing him to jump into the pit himself, or else they would break his limbs and throw him down brutally. Jiang Hao gently covered his face with his hand and laughed wildly, telling himself he originally didn't want to kill, but they were the ones desperately seeking death. The driver roared ferociously and swung the iron shovel straight at Jiang Hao's head with the intention of finishing him off instantly. In a breathtaking moment, the Assassin King leaned his body to dodge the attack and unleashed a powerful counterstrike. The miserable villain fell straight down to the bottom of the deep pit, turning the grave he had painstakingly prepared for others into his own burial place. He casually stood by the edge of the pit, looking down and mocking that the guy had personally chosen the path to hell even though the gates of heaven were still open. The criminal lay flat in the pit with a distorted face, stunned by his opponent's combat skills that far exceeded those of ordinary people. Outraged at seeing his comrade defeated, the bearded guy roared, demanding to kill Jiang Hao to avenge his brother. Without a single flinch, he executed a graceful dodge, then delivered a lightning-fast punishing strike to his opponent's vital spot. The second subordinate was also quickly kicked flying into the dark deep pit, making their deadly trap now seem truly ridiculous. The bald boss smirked faintly, praising his moves, but coldly ordered his henchmen to drain this arrogant guy's blood dry. Immediately, the bodyguard Xiangzi swung a gleaming blade and charged madly, aiming straight at the Assassin King tonight. The Assassin King clenched his powerful fist, the coldness exuding from his strong hands making the surrounding space seem to freeze. He suddenly closed in and tightly crushed the enemy's face, leaving the mercenary only enough time to widen his eyes in terror before an absolute power. A brutal slam onto the ground created a blinding dust explosion, flattening all the arrogant men's will to resist. Jiang Hao nonchalantly ran his hand through his hair with a calm expression, as if he had just performed a completely trivial act. Standing at the edge of the deep pit looking down at the ones lying scattered, he silently mocked the tragic end of those who dared to dig their own graves. He tremblingly confessed that Van Shimin was the one behind all the plots and pleaded for him to generously spare his life. The Assassin King glanced with contempt, telling himself there was no need to dirty his hands further with the blood of these despicable cowards. The bald guy panicked and screamed for mercy when forced to grab the rock, trembling before the cruel sentence awaiting him. Ultimately, in despair, he had to deliver a fatal blow to his own head to atone, ending the bloody tragedy right in the dark night. Jiang Hao walked away slowly, behind him the deadly abyss burying the honor of those who dared to despise the Assassin King. While he casually sat down to rest, the bodyguard Tu began to sluggishly wake up amidst the rubble of the backyard. He demanded that the guy quickly get up and prepare the car to take him to Fo Duong Street tonight. Tu held his aching head, confusedly asking about the mercenaries' whereabouts, only to receive an indifferent answer that they had left. As soon as they reached the bustling street, he ordered the bodyguard to return on his own and firmly demanded that he not be followed. He returned to the old grocery store in the small alley, where the old neighbor lady was sitting leisurely enjoying the breeze under the oil lamp. The old woman informed him that the mysterious girl had appeared a long time ago, urging him to act quickly to seek the truth. He lightly raised his hand to knock on the faded wooden room door, an indescribable feeling of nostalgia welling up inside him for his late comrade. Facing the young woman who just opened the door, he pressed to ask if she was Tun Han, the only relative of Red Wolf. Answering his expectation was a sharp, vigilant gaze and a firm assertion that he had found the wrong person. Jiang Hao stood before the girl and gently introduced himself as her brother's best friend to dispel her suspicion. He opened his palm to reveal the emerald green jade pendant, the sacred token proving the close relationship between the two. Seeing the treasure, Tun Han was stunned, grabbed his hand, and earnestly interrogated him about her brother's current whereabouts. Jiang Hao's eyes briefly showed a hint of sorrow as he internally struggled to hide the cruel truth about his comrade's death. He reassured her that her brother was currently busy with important work abroad, so he specially asked him to visit the family. Hearing that, the young girl sighed in relief, immediately changing to a welcoming attitude and earnestly inviting him inside to make amends. Stepping into the simple room, he saw a grandmother bedridden and wondered where her younger brother, Tun Loi, was. Tun Han's face suddenly sank with melancholy when mentioning her younger brother, about to explain her family's tragic circumstances. Suddenly from the front door, a desperate scream echoed, signaling bad news that startled both of them in fright. A young man rushed frantically into the room and screamed in despair that Tun Loi was in grave danger and needed to be rescued immediately. Tun Han hastily held onto Dong Tu's shoulders, urging him to calmly recount the origin of what just happened to her younger brother. Dong Tu choked up as he recounted that Tun Loi's business was going smoothly when suddenly a dark underworld boss nicknamed Black Panther came to cause trouble. Hearing that terrifying name, the young lady was so shocked she couldn't speak, having a premonition of a horrific disaster approaching. The van sped through the deserted streets, carrying the impatience and burning intention of rescue in the Assassin King's heart. On the way, Tun Han sobbed as she told of the massive debt from a staged usury contract right when her mother fell seriously ill. The stop was Passion Bar, a place of debauchery full of danger that served as the lair of the Lone Shark Gang. Jiang Hao placed his hand on Dong Tu's shoulder, requesting him to stay outside and keep watch, while Tun Han also urged her comrade to listen to him. He decisively took the lead, stepping inside, leaving behind the probing gazes of the partygoers drunkenly immersed in alcohol. From the upper floor of the bar, the wealthy were wildly throwing money and cheering for a bloody performance below. Right in the center was a brutal underground arena, where a fighter was unleashing a ruthless finishing blow on a dying opponent lying on the floor. The match in the underground arena was incredibly brutal as the karate fighter delivered a thunderous knee strike right to his opponent's stomach. He triumphantly roared amid the crowd's crazy cheering, completely satisfied after his powerful, violent performance. In the VIP room, Boss Black Panther was smugly bragging to his honored guests that the master earlier was his trump card, recruited with a large sum of money. As soon as a subordinate reported that Tun Loi's younger sister had arrived, the boss slightly smirked and ordered her to be let in. Tun Han fearfully walked into the enemy's lair, followed by Jiang Hao with a leisurely demeanor, as if he was taking a stroll. The young lady tremblingly called out Black Panther's name, while the boss calmly sat with his back turned, radiating a suffocating pressure. He growled a threat that if she didn't pay the full ransom immediately, her brother's arm tendons would surely be completely severed. Jiang Hao unexpectedly stepped up to shield the girl and directly called the boss by his birth name, a bow, to request a peaceful negotiation. The underlings were furious and about to rush in to tear him apart, thinking he was insulting their boss, but he timely signaled them to stop. With a cold look, he boldly declared he would only pay exactly 50,000 yuan to clear the debt, considering this black market credit operation illegal. Jiang Hao stood facing the tattooed boss, calmly declaring that regarding the illegal kidnapping, as long as he apologized to Tun Loi, he would let everything slide. Hearing that, Black Panther clutched his forehead and burst into hysterical laughter, arrogantly roaring that he had rolled in the underworld for over 20 years, but no one had ever dared to disrespect him like this. The Assassin King didn't mind that arrogant attitude at all. He looked straight into the enemy's eyes and decisively proposed a deal that if he won, all debts would be wiped clean. The bald boss continued to laugh out loud, mocking him as a madman, while confidently betting that if he really won, he wouldn't just cancel the debt but also kneel and call him grandfather. Right after the deal was sealed, the whole group moved to the brightly lit arena area, where a foreign martial arts master in a white uniform was already standing waiting. As Jiang Hao leisurely strode into the ring, The referee immediately swung his arm and shouted to begin to officially commence the brutal death match. Standing before his opponent, the karate fighter pointed a finger right at his face and spewed a string of mocking foreign words to provoke the Assassin King. Immediately, the foreigner's eyes flared with ferocious bloodshot streaks. He roared fiercely and gathered all his strength to launch a thunderous punch carrying sky-high murderous intent. The 1,000-pound fist tore through the air, rushing forward at terrifying speed, but Jiang Hao still stood silently like a stone statue with his hands behind his back, making no defensive move. Witnessing this extremely perilous scene, Tun Han below panicked, squeezed her eyes shut, and covered her face with her hands, not daring to look at the tragedy about to fall on her benefactor. The karate fighter used all his strength to perform a high jump, launching a highly dangerous aerial attack. However, Jiang Hao just slightly dodged, making the master stumble and forcing him to clutch his head in pain due to the missed blow. Furious at being humiliated, the fighter screamed incomprehensible foreign curses with a face full of ferocity. He put all his power into a heavy punch, charging straight ahead as if wanting to crush the one standing proudly there. Jiang Hao still casually walked with a contemptuous smile, making the enemy even more frantic over the gap in their levels. The fighter roared again in ultimate rage, his bloodshot eyes looking as if he wanted to devour the Assassin King instantly. He executed a final desperate jump, pouring his last bit of strength into a direct frontal attack to turn the tide. But Jiang Hao coldly raised his hand and stopped the opponent's fist as easily as if he was just playing around. Without holding back at all, he delivered a ruthless blow to the chest, causing the fighter to spit blood and become completely paralyzed. With a lightning-fast finishing move, he knocked the enemy into the air, ending the bloody battle in terrifying silence. Jiang Hao unexpectedly launched a tremendously powerful roundhouse kick, giving the karate fighter no time to react. He continued to press the attack with a storm of strikes, hitting straight at the weak points on the opponent's body. Faced with overwhelming power, the underworld master could only helplessly defend himself before gradually collapsing in the middle of the ring. Jiang Hao executed a beautiful spinning kick, landing right on the fighter's face and knocking him unconscious. The massive body of the defeated man flew far and then free fell onto the canvas in the astonishment of all the guests. A dry thud echoed along with splatters of fresh blood, completely putting an end to the foreigner's arrogance. The Assassin King coldly looked down at Black Panther and mocked that someone who hadn't even reached the blood-chi threshold dared to call himself a grandmaster. The underworld boss was so shocked he dropped his cigar, trembling in disbelief at his trump card's swift defeat. Tun Han was stunned, covering her mouth in amazement as she realized her future brother-in-law possessed such earth-shattering power. In the distance, the mysterious man smirked in amusement, as if he had just discovered an extremely valuable toy. Jiang Hao launched himself down from the ring, heading straight for the boss Black Panther, who was standing there stunned and amazed. He stood proudly in front of him and coldly demanded that he keep his promise to kneel down and call him grandfather. Black Panther furiously pointed the gun barrel straight at him, while the young girl panicked and screamed a fearful warning. Holding an apple in his hand, the Assassin King smiled a freezing smile and warned that his very stubbornness was seeking its own death. The boss lost all his senses and pulled the trigger, swearing viciously to send him to the afterlife to reunite with his ancestors immediately. The bullet tore through the air, shooting forward, but he calmly dodged it by a hair's breadth with a strangely leisurely demeanor. Jiang Hao's eyes suddenly flared with a bloodthirsty red light, signaling the terrifying wrath of a professional assassin about to erupt. In the blink of an eye, he unleashed a brutal strike that left the boss no time to react, while Tun Han could only cover her face in sheer terror. The power of his move was so great that it split the lead bullet, flying as fast as lightning right in midair. The villain now could only widen his eyes, trembling in despair as the death sentence truly materialized right before him. The boss Black Panther collapsed onto the arena floor in a pool of blood, ending a life of arrogance at the hands of the Assassin King. His subordinates stared in horror as they witnessed their boss truly take his last breath, their pride instantly shattered. They hastily groveled on the ground, crying and begging Jiang Hao to spare their worthless lives because they still had old mothers and young children to care for. Amidst the chaotic atmosphere, the mysterious man approached and made an unexpected cooperation offer to him. He guaranteed he could use his influence to wipe clean all traces of this killing and help him rescue his imprisoned friend. Jiang Hao narrowed his eyes in suspicion, coldly questioning the stranger as to why he should put his trust in him. The man smiled slyly, affirming he only wanted to befriend a talented person and hoping to be repaid by him in the future. After a moment of consideration, the Assassin King decisively nodded in agreement to this underground contract and coldly walked away. Watching Jiang Hao's figure gradually disappear behind the door, the boss silently concluded that this was definitely no ordinary man. The next day, the radiant morning sunlight shone upon the entrance of the Feng family's mansion, beginning new turbulent waves in the wealthy household. Breakfast at the Feng family passed in a suffocating atmosphere as each member harbored their own calculations around the lavish table. The younger sister spitefully poured all the blame onto Jiang Hao's head, claiming he was the reason her sister had to hide away at a hotel. The stern patriarch put down his teacup, coldly demanding his daughter be quiet if she couldn't say anything useful. Not wanting to get tangled in a pointless argument, Jiang Hao calmly announced he had finished eating and wanted to go out for a walk to get some fresh air. Just as he reached the door, he suddenly stopped when Uncle Feng called him back with a face full of concern. He handed him a dossier and asked him to take it to the company for Van because she urgently needed this document. He quietly left under the glaring daggers of the younger sister, who was always brewing the intention of kicking him out of the house. Jiang Hao strode confidently toward the building of the Wine and Cosmetics Corporation, following the exact address written on the dossier. At the grand lobby, he stated his purpose of delivering documents to Chairwoman Feng and received dedicated guidance from the female receptionist. He stepped into the elevator to go to the top floor, silently mentally preparing for an unexpected encounter with his beautiful fiancée. Jiang Hao had just stepped into the elevator when he brushed past a tall man with his face covered by a baseball cap and dark sunglasses. His eyes immediately narrowed, flashing a hint of suspicion as he keenly noticed the abnormality from the stranger. Looking at the other's back, he silently concluded that it was the A-rank assassin Black Demon, and wondered if this notorious sex offender came to Gulang to hunt for prey. The metal elevator doors slowly closed, temporarily cutting off the Assassin King's train of thought. Entering the luxurious workspace, he strode straight to the desk of Lady Van without prior notice. Van looked up with an annoyed gaze, strictly reprimanding him and demanding that next time he must know how to knock. Ignoring the spiteful attitude, Jiang Hao calmly handed over the dossier, while the chairwoman just coldly chased him away immediately. He gave a slight sarcastic smirk, casually questioning if this was how she treated guests. Before turning around, he seriously warned her that the situation in Gulang was very dangerous and advised her absolutely not to go out. Watching his back as he left, Van irritably scolded him for being petty by intentionally cursing her, but he just lightly dropped a reminder for her to be careful. Jiang Hao was strolling on the street when a bright red supercar suddenly braked hard, blocking the road and throwing the surrounding people into a panic. The Assassin King remained unfazed, his hands in his pockets, calmly looking at the smoking car without slightly changing his expression. The car window rolled down, and the young man Hao-min smiled, proposing to invite him to join an underground street race organized by his group. Jiang Hao coldly refused but immediately paused when the other guy brought out a huge prize money as bait, because right now he was truly strapped for cash. He opened the car door and seriously reconfirmed splitting the prize, and the driver quickly assured him he absolutely wouldn't break his word. As soon as Jiang Hao agreed to sit in the passenger seat, the young man smirked secretly, revealing the dark scheme he had already set up. The supercar immediately roared, shooting forward like an arrow tearing through the airflow between the skyscrapers. Leaving the bustling urban area behind, the car headed straight into a treacherous mountain pass with death-defying curves stretching across the mountainside. At the gathering area, Hao-min stepped out of the car and introduced him to a group of rowdy plebeians approaching with a murderous aura. The muscular leader immediately burst into laughter, mocking him as the wife-stealer of the Van family's young master, while insulting his father's death as merely a launching pad for him to cling to a wealthy family's skirts. Jiang Hao coldly looked straight into the muscular guy's face and growled, questioning what he had just said, but the giant only arrogantly retorted that the mouth was his, so he'd say whatever he liked. The brute smirked proudly, tossing a compliment for his recklessness, then loudly ordered everyone to cut the crap so they could quickly start the race. Sitting inside the car, Hao-min sweated bullets and whispered a warning that the muscular guy was Loi Tu-ho, the troublesome illegitimate son of the Loi family. But Jiang Hao just calmly stated that it was even better. From inside the yellow supercar, Loi Tu-ho rolled down his window and looked over with a provocative gaze, threatening to give him a taste of suffering for daring to anger him. Jiang Hao turned to inquire about the remaining racer's identity, and Hao Min urgently introduced him as young Master Kim the Hien, a notorious professional racer in the circuit. Sitting grandly in the white sports car, Kim the Hien leaned back in his seat with an extremely arrogant expression, giving a cold snort full of disdain towards his weak opponents. The three supercars rumbled toward the starting line before the winding and treacherous mountain pass, while a hot girl stepped into the middle of the road, raising two red flags and shouting for them to get ready. Her slender hand raised high in the air, loudly beginning the countdown from the final 3 seconds amidst the extreme tension of the speed enthusiasts. As the girl lowered one finger and shouted out number 2, the engines of the billion-dollar machines began to roar wildly like fierce beasts waiting to be unchained. As the final countdown second ended, the girl leaned forward and swept her hands down as a signal for the supercars to accelerate and tear through the wind, opening a life-and-death battle on the cliffside. The three supercars wildly shot forward on the deadly road, the harsh sound of tire friction echoing between the two vertical cliffs. Sitting in the driver's seat, Hao Min was sweating with tension, advising Jiang Hao not to try catching up because Loi Tuho had pushed the torque to an extremely dangerous maximum. On the straightaway, Tuho's yellow car continuously provoked them, deliberately cutting them off and squeezing Hao Min's red car against the edge. Jiang Hao's face was ice cold, realizing the opponent intentionally slowed down just to force them into a death trap rather than caring about the race's ranking. Hao Min fearfully yelled that the maniac ahead was intentionally playing with their lives. If this continued, even staying alive would be a luxury. Losing all patience with his teammates' cowardice, the Assassin King reached out, grabbed Hao Min's collar, and coldly ordered him to the back seat so he could personally take the wheel. Thrown into the back seat, Hao Min clutched his neck in extreme panic, scolding him for being a clueless man and trying to drag them all to die together. Before he could finish speaking, Jiang Hao stomped the gas pedal to the floor, sharply turning the steering wheel to execute a masterful drift right along the edge of the abyss. The spoiled rich kid squeezed his eyes shut, screaming in terror seeing the car heading straight for the precarious cliff and begging him to hit the brakes. Despite the desperate screams, the bright red supercar under the Assassin King's hands still tore through the wind at terrifying speed, sliding along the fragile boundary between life and death. The red car under Jiang Hao's hands executed a perfect drift through the sharp corner, smoothly leaving the opponent behind. Hao Min gasped in amazement that this godlike steering skill was something even a professional racer couldn't pull off. Looking through the rearview mirror, Loi Tuho frowned in confusion, wondering why the Feng family's young master leveled up so fast today. However, he quickly regained his arrogant demeanor, smirking maliciously and swearing to make the red car flip into the ravine at the next S-curve. In contrast to the enemy's killing intent, Jiang Hao still calmly drove with one hand while drinking water with the other, making Hao Min scream in terror because the death curve was ahead. Ignoring the screaming, the Assassin King merely told him in a light tone to stay calm and watch because the real show was only just beginning. Right at the edge of the abyss, the red car roared as it clung to the barrier, parallel drifting with the yellow car that was intentionally squeezing it on the inside track. At this moment, Loi Tuho broke into a cold sweat upon realizing the space on the road was completely insufficient to pull ahead and execute his cruel intention. Without giving the enemy time to react, Jiang Hao steered sharply, actively directing the supercar to ram hard into the side of the yellow car, creating a fiery collision. The brutal crash carried a terrifying crushing force that left Loi Tuho utterly stunned, his eyes rolling back in terror at his opponent's absolute madness. The shocking ram right at the death curve caused the yellow and red supercars to slam into each other at terrifying speeds, creating scorching friction marks on the mountain pass road. Inside the cockpit, Loi Tuho's eyes bulged with fierce bloodshot streaks, gritting his teeth, cursing the man next to him, and yelling that even if he died, there was no way he'd let him pass. Despite the opponent's fierce resistance, the bright red McLaren under Jiang Hao's godlike control still pressed close, step by step pushing the yellow beast toward the edge of the cliff. At the apex of the turn, the horrific pressure from the red supercar knocked the yellow car's front wheels off the road surface, crossing beyond the safety boundary. The two cars continued drifting a long distance along the edge of the abyss, the screeching tires blending with the deafening sounds of impact. The very moment the front wheels completely slipped off the cliff, a harsh noise rang out, signaling the end of all desperate efforts from the arrogant racer. The expensive yellow supercar lost its center of gravity, its body slamming hard onto the median barrier, sending shattered glass splashing into the air before officially free-falling. Loi Tuho panicked and tightly gripped the door frame, his face contorted in utter terror, as he saw the death waiting for him at the bottom of the abyss. The supercar tumbled through the air, diving headfirst into the blue sky amid the helplessness and despair of the one who had brought this tragic end upon himself. Meanwhile, Jiang Hao's bright red McLaren remained firmly anchored on the road, proudly shooting forward to continue conquering the limits of speed. The yellow supercar tumbled and disappeared down the abyss, while Jiang Hao calmly pressed the gas, sending the red McLaren shooting forward. With absolute victory, Hao Min was extremely smug upon receiving praises as a sly fox for excellently claiming the championship of the race. Right after, the rich kid received a call from his cousin proposing to throw a victory party tonight along with Boss Black Crow. Hao Min hesitantly announced he was with his brother-in-law, but the cousin seemed even more excited and urged him to bring this mysterious guest along for an audience. Jiang Hao coldly refused, forcing Hao Min to swallow his pride and beg, arguing that if he didn't go, his father would lose face in front of the relatives. Facing the persistent clinging, the assassin king could only sigh and agree, then closed his eyes to rest, ignoring the fake brother-in-law's excessive excitement. Meanwhile at the city hospital, a gloomy atmosphere enveloped the high-class ward of the Grand Loi family. Loi Tu-ho lay motionless on the bed with his body wrapped in white bandages, weakly crying and lamenting his excruciating pain to his mother. Seeing his precious son severely injured, the Loi family patriarch was red-eyed with rage and gritted his teeth, swearing a toxic oath to break the legs of the Feng family's brat for revenge. However, Tu-ho immediately corrected that the real driver was Jiang Hao, making the underworld boss gasp in astonishment at the recklessness of the Feng family's new son-in-law. The Loi family patriarch sternly ordered his subordinates to strike quickly so that Jiang Hao wouldn't live to see tomorrow's sunrise. Lying in the hospital bed, Loi Tu-ho flashed a twisted smile thinking of how his angry father would turn the opponent into mincemeat. Meanwhile at the Kinhoa Hotel, Hao Min led Jiang Hao into a luxurious banquet hall amidst the scrutinizing gazes of the waiting crowd. The fake brother-in-law proudly introduced Jiang Hao to his cousin right upon arriving at the banquet table. The cousin warmly shook Jiang Hao's hand and offered polite greetings, but they hid a deep probing into his true background. When everyone was seated, the big shots began to evaluate Jiang Hao's appearance, and deemed his outer look entirely too ordinary compared to the rumors. Boss Black Crow leaned on his chin, observing with a disdainful look, secretly mocking that he was just a lucky wild chicken who got to cling to the Feng family's skirts. Hao Min advised him to proactively raise his glass and toast the bosses to make it easier to do business in Galang, but the assassin king coldly replied that he didn't like drinking alcohol. That uncooperative attitude made Boss Black Crow lose his temper. He resentfully grabbed a bottle of hard liquor and poured it straight into his glass with the intent to put the newcomer in his place. The stream of alcohol overflowed out of the glass like an arrogant challenge, signaling an uncompromising conflict about to explode right at the banquet table. Jiang Hao faced Boss Black Crow's reprimand that if he refused this glass of wine, it meant he was publicly humiliating him. Hao Min hastily intervened and tactfully suggested the boss pour some of the alcohol into his own glass to keep the peace for the party. Immediately, the underlings sitting nearby roared and berated Jiang Hao as trash who had ruined their lucrative business deal with the Van family. Facing the insults, the assassin king maintained a terrifying calm and gently asked what the outcome would be if he actually drank it all. Boss Black Crow casually lit a cigarette, and affirmed that only then would he officially acknowledge his existence as well as show him respect. He held his glass high in arrogance, loudly declaring that if he dared to drink one, he'd follow with one, and if he drank 10, he'd down all 10 as well. Without wasting words on explanation, Jiang Hao suddenly reached out and grabbed the 3-kilo bottle of hard liquor, astonishing everyone present. Under the stunned gaze of the crowd, he tipped the bottle upside down into his mouth, chugging the strong liquid in a suffocating silence. The assassin king casually held the empty bottle upside down in front of his opponent, his cold eyes looking straight at him, and lightly signaled that it was now his turn. The lackeys panicked and cried out to the heavens because that bottle weighed up to 3 kilos. Even a notorious drinker like Boss Black Crow couldn't down it all in one go. Boss Black Crow angrily gripped the liquor bottle tightly, growling to ask if the brat Jiang Hao was trying to use a drinking trick to scare him. Ignoring the dissuasion, he recklessly tipped the hard liquor bottle upside down and chugged it all in one breath, as if wanting to affirm the bravery of a notorious heavy drinker. Immediately, The extremely strong alcohol made Black Crow vomit profusely, yet he still tried to keep his contorted face and affirmed that he was completely fine. The cousin immediately pointed his finger to criticize Jiang Hao for intentionally hiding his true strength to toy with everyone, while simultaneously declaring he would stand on the side of justice and not show mercy to family. His madness reaching its peak, Black Crow glared with murderous intent and threatened to kill him immediately for daring to trick him. Facing the out-of-control gangster, the Assassin King still calmly observed that the opponent himself was the one digging his own grave. Black Crow roared fiercely and swung his arm to violently throw the liquor bottle at Jiang Hao to crush his enemy's head in a fit of rage. Facing the flying object, Jiang Hao maintained an indifferent attitude as if watching a cheap comedy act by a defeated man. In just a blink of an eye, he unleashed a brutal strike tearing through the air, shattering the liquor bottle into pieces and knocking the opponent far away. Ending the bloody banquet was the image of Boss Black Crow lying motionless on the floor amidst a pile of shattered glass, completely defeated by the hands of the Assassin King. The people around the banquet table panicked and yelled at Jiang Hao that he must be tired of living for daring to touch Black Crow, who was sworn brothers with Truong Gujia. Lying on the floor with a bleeding wound, Black Crow gritted his teeth and ordered his subordinates to immediately call all their brothers to bring weapons to eliminate the enemy. Hao-Man was so afraid that his face turned pale, constantly reminding him that the opponent had hundreds of lackeys. But Jiang Hao still calmly sat eating his meal as if nothing had happened. The Assassin King glanced with an uncaring look, asserting that he came here to have dinner and wouldn't stop until he was full, causing the fake brother-in-law to declare he would leave him to fend for himself. The banquet room door was suddenly kicked open, revealing the dark silhouettes of dozens of aggressive thugs brandishing weapons in their hands to protect their boss. The murderous crowd flooded in and surrounded the room, creating a terrifying pressure weighing down on the already extremely tense atmosphere. Hao-Man was startled upon realizing the leader who just appeared was Tran Dao, a notorious big shot in the underworld. The man with a long scar on his face, dubbed the Blade King of the Ngulang region, stood tall and entered with a cold gaze full of murderous intent. Tran Dao worriedly asked about the wound, but Black Crow frantically brushed him off, pointing at Jiang Hao and demanding his subordinate to hack him to death right on the spot to cool his anger. The Blade King's eyes suddenly darkened with danger. He bowed his head to receive the order and prepared to carry out the death sentence for the Assassin King. Tran Dao closed in from behind with a pitch-black murderous aura, coldly threatening Jiang Hao to keep his eyes wide open in his next life before daring to mess with someone out of his league. He swung his razor-sharp blade and rushed forward with a ferocious face, roaring an order for the Assassin King to die right under his blade. However, Jiang Hao still casually sat still on his chair, using only 2 fingers to gently pinch the downward slashing blade to the astonishment of his opponent. His eyes calmly observed the enemy through the gap of the weapon, revealing an absolute dominance that made Tran Dao begin to shudder in fear. The Blade King widened his eyes in horror upon realizing the true identity of the person in front of him. Cold sweat began to pour down his pale face. Immediately, he threw away his weapon and prostrated himself on the ground, begging him to spare his life, blaming himself for being blind and failing to recognize the big shot right in front of him. Standing nearby, Black Crow was utterly shocked and loudly yelled to ask if Tran Dao had taken the wrong medicine to act so disgracefully. Tran Dao roared for him to shut up and tremblingly recounted Jiang Hao's feats of defeating the foreign master as well as Black Panther, which he had personally witnessed. The famous regional assassin now could only kowtow to apologize, earnestly thanking the Assassin King for generously sparing his life. Jiang Hao gave a slight satisfied smirk and coldly affirmed that if he hadn't remembered the truth soon enough, the banquet room would now have one more soulless corpse. Jiang Hao coldly ordered everyone to get lost because they were ruining his dinner, while Tran Dao hastily bowed his head to give thanks for being spared. Immediately, the Blade King urged his subordinates to leave, but Black Crow was still frantically screaming, ordering that no one was allowed to move from the room. Tran Dao earnestly explained that this was a figure they absolutely could not touch. If they didn't know better, none of them would walk out of there in one piece. Turning a deaf ear to all warnings, Black Crow pointed straight at Jiang Hao's face, insulting him as just a fake son-in-law, and offered a 1 million yuan bounty to anyone who dared to hack him to death. Blinded by the massive bounty, the black-clad assassins began to waver and decided to risk their lives for a chance to change their fate. They simultaneously raised their weapons high, shouting to the heavens, and rushed to attack Jiang Hao like ferocious beasts starving for prey. However, a horrifying scene unfolded as streaks of blood splashed into the air, marking the end of the foolish ones who dared to challenge the Grim Reaper. Tran Dao stood tall over the pile of his subordinates' corpses, coldly challenging to see if anyone else had the guts to continue this crazy act. The Blade King boldly declared this was exactly the price to pay for those who dared to disrespect Jiang Hao, then decisively ordered the remaining people to retreat immediately. Black Crow clutched his bleeding wound and left the scene with a spiteful gaze, growling an oath that this was still not over, while Jiang Hao still casually sat eating his meal. Black Crow spitefully left the banquet room, not forgetting to look back and drop an oath that he would make Jiang Hao taste suffering for tonight's humiliation. Somewhere else, a phone screen clearly displayed a shocking news bulletin about the brutal death of a female student right near the high school area. In a luxurious hotel room, the assassin Black Demon casually sipped wine, his eyes full of murderous intent following the developments of the murder case. He gave a slight malicious smirk, silently evaluating that the previous prey, though pure, was still not as stimulating as mature women. Suddenly the phone rang, shattering the atmosphere, revealing the identity of a mysterious caller named Kahan. Black Demon immediately reported that he was still hunting the one who killed his brother Black Panther, and swore to make that person pay blood for blood. Answering was the authoritative voice of his superior, coldly criticizing him for only being engrossed in hunting women while neglecting important missions. The mysterious leader warned that Huaxiao was a land of crouching tigers and hidden dragons, demanding Black Demon to be extremely careful not to be eliminated by hidden masters. Hearing the news that 3 S-rank assassins from the Kor's family had stepped in to eliminate Grandmaster Trak Van Bach, the A-rank assassin couldn't help but be amazed. Ignoring the reminder not to be too flashy, Black Demon confidently asserted he always knew exactly what he was doing, then decisively ended the secret conversation. Black Demon hid his silenced pistol behind his back, coldly looking at the subordinate, who just rushed and breathlessly calling him second master. The lackey respectfully reported his business, causing the assassin to put away his gun and signal for him to enter the room to discuss important matters. Sitting on the sofa, Black Demon scoffed upon hearing that the one who killed Black Panther was just a nobody's son-in-law named Jiang Hao of the Feng family. The subordinate quickly introduced that Jiang Hao's fiancée was Feng Y Van, a beauty with country-toppling looks. Looking at the photo of the radiantly beautiful young lady on the phone screen, greed and lust began to rise within the assassin. Black Demon broke into a perverted smile, silently plotting a plan to capture Y Van to humiliate her in front of Jiang Hao before dealing the finishing blow to them both. Meanwhile, Jiang Hao was leisurely strolling through the antique market, planning to use his remaining money to buy a precious painting as a gift for the old master. His stop was Longnan Pavilion, a magnificent and grand multi-story building specializing in selling the city's most rare and precious treasures. Stepping into the quiet space of the showroom, the Assassin King slowly observed the antiques with the demeanor of an expert. Finally he paused in front of a landscape painting depicting a proud pine tree on a mountain peak, seemingly having found the most satisfactory gift. The store manager proudly introduced this as the green pine painting by the famous painter Truong Ko Duong, the treasure guarding the antique shop. While the surrounding guests endlessly praised the aura of the landscape painting, Jiang Hao still quietly observed with an unpredictable expression. Suddenly the Assassin King pointed straight at the painting and loudly declared this was just a fake, causing the entire crowd at the scene to be shocked. Facing the firm accusation, the manager angrily yelled and threatened that he would suffer severe consequences for daring to smear the reputation of this long-standing shop. He growled, affirming that any fake item sold here would be compensated at 3 times its value to prove their prestige. Jiang Hao gave a slight cold smirk, casually retorting that the truth cannot be faked, and he had no reason to go around slandering a small shop. The manager grew even more furious. He glared, guaranteeing that throughout 100 years of business they had never let a single poor-quality item slip through. Not wanting to waste more words, Jiang Hao decisively demanded he fulfill his promise of triple compensation, then immediately called the boss down here to confront him. The Assassin King unexpectedly executed a masterful jump, reaching out and snatching the painting off the wall amidst the extreme astonishment of the crowd. The manager panicked and tried to stop him, making the excuse that the boss was busy in a meeting on the 5th floor to shoo away the uninvited guests, not knowing the real trouble had only just begun. Jiang Hao carried the painting up the stairs, decisively declaring that if the boss wouldn't come down, he would personally go up to meet him. Inside the VIP room on the 5th floor, the big shots were agreeing with each other and endlessly praising the brilliant brushwork of an ancient painting. The Assassin King suddenly pushed the door and barged in, making the master sitting at the table angrily shout aloud, demanding the unauthorized person to leave immediately. Ignoring that anger, he calmly brought out the painting and demanded an explanation for why Longnan Pavilion dared to scam customers with fakes. The white-bearded Elder Kong slammed the table in indignation, affirming the shop's prestige was absolute, and they would never allow any counterfeit items to appear. The manager and those present began to join in to apply pressure, forcing Jiang Hao to apologize to Master Kong while threatening him with Chairman Chu's punishment. Without a hint of fear, the Assassin King casually spread the painting on the table and challenged the group of experts to use all their skills to appraise it once more. Master Kong immediately used a magnifying glass to meticulously examine every tiny detail on the landscape painting, while Jiang Hao stood behind with a fully confident smile. The old man raised his head and asserted this was a truly perfect masterpiece, growling to ask on what basis he dared to slander the shop. Jiang Hao maintained a mysterious attitude, forcing Master Kong to call in 2 more experts to verify it together to ensure objectivity in front of him. The experts affirmed the painting was an authentic piece and mocked Jiang Hao as just an ignorant fool intentionally smearing the shop's prestige. Jiang Hao despised the antique shop's level, making the manager catch fire, continuously screaming and insulting him as an arrogant little brat. His eyes suddenly became razor-sharp. He decisively pointed at the painting and ordered the crowd to look straight at this spot. His finger stopped at a hidden point, accompanied by a challenge to see if the veterans could recognize any fatal flaws. Elder Kong was angry because he couldn't find any traces, thinking he was just playing mysterious tricks to puzzle everyone. Jiang Hao smirked, explaining that this fake painting was too perfect, whereas Chuang Ko Duong's true style always harbored natural flaws. The assertion that the copy surpassed the original drove the managers crazy, treating it as nonsense and threatening to punish the troublemaker. To determine victory or defeat, Elder Kong immediately called to request the real painting and a magnifying glass be brought up for a direct comparison. Standing before the 2 paintings, Jiang Hao clearly exposed the difference between the soulless strokes of the fake and the authenticity from the flaws of the real one. With a confident smile, the Assassin King handed over the magnifying glass and challenged them to face this bitter truth themselves. Master Kong was utterly shocked when looking through the magnifying glass, silently exclaiming that the forger of this painting truly possessed copying skills that far surpassed even the famous painter's original work. The veteran experts around also bowed their heads in shame in unison, blaming themselves for spending their whole lives studying antiques, yet no one had discovered this bitter truth. Confirming the painting was a fake, Jiang Hao slightly smiled, reminding them of the compensation promise, and suggesting he just pick another painting of equivalent value instead of taking cash. When the Assassin King picked a painting worth up to 20 million yuan, Master Kong worried because the compensation money wasn't enough to cover it, so the chairman standing nearby hastily spent an extra 800,000 to make up the difference. He narrowed his eyes in suspicion at the unusual generosity, but the old man just gently affirmed that he simply wanted to make friends with a talented young man like him. Seeing the sincerity in the other's eyes, Jiang Hao gave a slight nod accepting the offer and felt satisfied to have gained a highly prestigious old friend. Watching his back gradually fading away from Longnan Pavilion, his companion still couldn't help but wonder why a big shot like the Chu family master had to spend so excessively to win favor with a junior. Master Kong thoughtfully concluded that Jiang Hao's eyesight was 10 times sharper than an ordinary person's, proving his martial arts had reached an extraordinary realm, and deemed the price of 800,000 to gain such a friend an absolute bargain. Just upon returning to the Feng family's mansion, Jiang Hao was warmly called in for a meal by Uncle Feng right as the family was gathering around the cozy banquet table. Right at the dining table, the old master curiously asked about the item in his hands. Jiang Hao calmly confirmed this was a famous painting he had just personally selected from Longnan Pavilion and brought back as a gift. The Feng family grandfather looked skeptical, warning Jiang Hao that the antique street was full of fakes and demanded he hand over the painting for him to personally inspect. Ignoring the elder's concern, the Assassin King continued to eat casually, and naturally affirmed he had personally verified the authenticity of the gift. The mother-in-law immediately spoke up sarcastically, questioning where he got the money to buy such a precious treasure when Jiang Hao didn't even have a single penny to his name. Seeing Hao Min about to open his mouth to explain the car racing incident, she flew into a rage, shouting loudly demanding her son shut his mouth immediately. Jiang Hao raised his wine glass in complete calm, gently explaining that he had exposed the fake painting at Longnan Pavilion, so Elder Chu showed him respect by compensating him. Hearing this, the mother-in-law became even more furious, screaming that those were blatant lies because a big shot like Elder Chu would never need help from trash. Facing her aggressive attitude, the assassin king decisively stood up and coldly declared he had finished eating, so he wanted to go to his room to rest. Uncle Feng watched his nephew's figure with a look full of anxiety, silently feeling helpless against the tense atmosphere enveloping the family. Even though his wife continued to scream about how her husband had brought a scoundrel into the house, Jiang Hao casually walked away without looking back once. Facing heavy pressure, the head of the Feng family told himself his life was saved by Jiang Hao's father, so he absolutely could not abandon him and would find an opportunity to confront the situation later. The scene at Longnan Pavilion stood majestically under the deeply blue, tranquil sky. Inside, Han Feng strode forward to greet his master and received a barrage of questions about the results of his investigation into the stranger's whereabouts. He reported that Jiang Hao was actually the useless son-in-law of the Feng family whom everyone constantly mocked. Despite praising his disciple's natural talent of reaching the blood-chi realm in his 20s, the old master still sternly reminded him absolutely not to underestimate the opponent. Han Feng still maintained a haughty attitude, asserting that even the Duong family members had never batted an eye at such a petty person. The old man observed thoughtfully, then ordered his trusted disciple to personally carry out a secret plan for him. At the Feng family mansion, Han Feng represented the Chu family to deliver an invitation and announce a grand banquet taking place on the 10th of this month. The mother-in-law clearly showed her confusion, continuously pressing to ask about the true reason behind the sudden warm reception from Elder Chu. Facing the barrage of questions, the master martial artist narrowed his eyes in extreme annoyance and growled to ask if their family intended to decline the invitation. The mother-in-law hastily lowered her voice to apologize for the family's disrespect, while Han Feng rolled his eyes around and coldly questioned Jiang Hao's absence.